Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time, way back, to a world lit by flickering candlelight and the fiery glow of a forge. Imagine the scent of wood smoke heavy in the air, the rhythmic clang of hammer on steel echoing through a small village. You can almost feel the rough spun tunic scratching against your skin as you trudge through muddy lanes. Life back then was different. Let's just say modern plumbing and Netflix are things you'd miss a lot. You probably won't survive this, but that's okay. It's just a story. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself not in a cozy bed, but in a medieval village. It's dawn, rooster crows pierce the morning mist, and the air smells of damp earth and manure. You're headed towards the heart of the village, the blacksmith's forge. He's a vital part of this community, probably even more than the baker. After all, without him, no one has tools, weapons, or even horseshoes. And let's face it, broken tools in the Dark Ages mean hunger, vulnerability, and very little chance of ordering replacements online. You hear the unmistakable ring of metal on metal. As you approach, the heat intensifies, and you see him, a burly figure, face grimy, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead. He's wrestling with a glowing piece of iron on the anvil. Historians still argue whether all blacksmiths were genuinely this imposing, or if that's just the result of historical romanticization. He's not just hammering randomly, you realize. He's shaping something with purpose. It's a plowshare, the metal blade that cuts through the earth, allowing farmers to plant their crops. Without this, the village will struggle to feed itself. This is serious business. You're reminded of how important the blacksmith was back then. In fact, in some cultures, blacksmiths were seen as almost magical figures, wielding power over the elements themselves. There were even legends about blacksmiths who could forge weapons so sharp they could cut through anything. Sounds a little far-fetched, maybe? He glances up, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He nods curtly, then returns to his work. He doesn't have time for idle chit-chat. Time, in this era, is a precious commodity. Every moment not spent working is a moment not contributing to the survival of the village. You watch as he heats the metal in the forge, the flames licking greedily around it. The forge itself is a simple structure, a hearth of brick or stone, fueled by charcoal. You notice the bellows pumping air into the flames, making them burn hotter. It's a surprisingly efficient system. Charcoal was the fuel of choice back then because it burned hotter and cleaner than wood. Although you'd still smell like you'd been camping after a day near the forge. He pulls the glowing iron from the fire with a pair of tongs. It's an almost supernatural sight, the orange hot metal hissing in the air. He places it on the anvil, a heavy block of iron, and begins to hammer. Sparks fly with each blow, illuminating his face in bursts of light. You try to imagine what it must be like to work in such heat, day in and day out. The constant heat, the noise, the sheer physical exertion. This guy has a gym membership paid in sweat and sparks, that's for sure. The clang of the hammer is deafening. He shapes the metal with practiced ease, turning and striking, turning and striking. He uses different hammers for different purposes. A heavy sledgehammer for shaping, a smaller hammer for finer details. It's a carefully choreographed dance of fire, metal, and muscle. As he works, you notice the other tools hanging around the forge, tongs of various sizes, chisels, punches, and a quenching tub filled with water. Each tool has its purpose, each plays a vital role in the process. The quenching tub is especially important. It's used to rapidly cool the metal after it's been shaped, hardening it and making it stronger. And here's a quirky fact, sometimes blacksmiths would quench the metal in, well, let's just say less conventional liquids. We're talking urine, blood, all sorts of questionable fluids. The theory was that it added unique properties to the steel. You're kind of glad you're just watching. The blacksmith finishes shaping the plowshare. He holds it up, inspecting it critically. He nods, satisfied, and plunges it into the quenching tub. A cloud of steam erupts, and the air fills with the smell of hot metal. He pulls it out, now cooled and hardened. He wipes it down with a rag, and you can see the finished product, a sturdy, functional plowshare, ready to till the fields and feed the village. It's a simple object, but it represents so much: hard work, skill, and the promise of sustenance. You think about the other things he makes: horseshoes, axes, knives, swords. The blacksmith is the supplier of everything useful. He even fixes pots and pans, the medieval equivalent of your local handyman, but with way more fire and less small talk. Every item he creates is a testament to his skill and dedication. In this world, there's no mass production, no factories churning out identical products. Each item is handcrafted, unique, and imbued with the blacksmith's personal touch. This is true craftsmanship. Suddenly, a young boy rushes into the forge, breathless. He speaks to the blacksmith in hushed tones. You don't understand the language, but you can sense the urgency in his voice. The blacksmith listens intently, his brow furrowed. After a moment, he nods. He grabs his hammer and heads toward the village center, with the boy following close behind. You tag along, out of curiosity. You see the problem. A wheel on one of the carts used to haul goods is broken. Without it, trade will be severely impacted. And, as you've gathered, trade is vital. The blacksmith assesses the damage quickly. He gets to work, finding a suitable piece of wood and setting about shaping a new wheel spoke. It's a different kind of work than forging metal, but he approaches it with the same skill and precision. He uses an axe to rough out the shape, then a draw knife to refine it. He carefully measures and fits the spoke into the wheel. You can't help but be impressed by his versatility. He's not just a metalworker, he's a craftsman, capable of working with a variety of materials. As he works, you overhear snippets of conversation between the villagers. They're discussing the upcoming harvest, the weather, and the threat of bandits. Life in the Middle Ages was not easy, that much is clear. Danger lurked around every corner, from disease and famine to war and violence. The blacksmith finishes repairing the wheel. The villagers cheer. It's a small victory, but it's a victory nonetheless. He's saved the day, not by swinging a sword, but by using his skills to fix something broken, which is, arguably, even more valuable. As the sun begins to set, the blacksmith returns to his forge. The day's work is far from over. There are still tools to be sharpened, horseshoes to be made, and weapons to be repaired. You watch him as he stokes the fire and prepares for the night's work. He is a vital part of this community, a pillar of strength in a world of uncertainty. He continues working long into the night, the glow of the forge a beacon in the darkness. A humble but essential figure in a world struggling to survive. You're left with a profound respect for the skills, dedication, and resilience of the medieval blacksmith. Story incomplete continues tomorrow. You trudge through the heavy wooden door, the hinges groaning a weary welcome like an old dragon clearing its throat. The air hits you, a wave of heat, cold dust, and something vaguely metallic that clings to the back of your throat like a stubborn houseguest. This is it. The forge. The blacksmith's fiery domain, and honestly, probably the warmest place in town right now. Hope you brought your fire-resistant socks. Your eyes struggle to adjust from the relatively dim world outside to the incandescent glow emanating from the heart of the workshop. A monstrous forge dominates the space, its brick belly radiating a heat that makes the air shimmer. Coals burn within, not with a crackling ferocity, but a slow, steady orange glow, the kind of patient heat that promises both destruction and creation. You can almost feel it baking the moisture right out of your skin. Around the forge, arranged with a chaotic sort of order, are the tools of the trade. Hammers, in every size imaginable, lean against the wall like a metallic army at rest. Some are worn smooth from countless blows, their faces pitted and scarred like seasoned warriors. Others are newer, gleaming and eager to taste the heat of the forge. You idly wonder if hammers ever get jealous of each other. Probably not. They're hammers. Tongs, of course, are essential. Long-handled and grasping, they resemble the claws of some mythical beast, ready to snatch burning metal from the fiery depths. You see a dozen or more scattered around, each designed for a specific task, a different grip, a slightly altered angle. Holding hot metal with the wrong tongs is like trying to eat soup with a fork, technically possible, but deeply unsatisfying and potentially disastrous. An anvil, the blacksmith's steadfast companion, sits squarely in the center of the workspace. This isn't just any anvil. It's a solid, imposing block of steel, polished smooth by years of relentless hammering. You run your hand over its surface. It's surprisingly cool to the touch, a testament to its ability to absorb and dissipate heat. You imagine all the swords, plowshares, and horseshoe nails that have been shaped on this very anvil, all the history hammered into its unyielding form. It's basically the blacksmithing equivalent of a really, really old and reliable laptop. Various quenching tubs, filled with water and mysterious dark liquids, sit nearby. These are the blacksmith's cooling tanks, used to rapidly cool and harden the metal after it's been shaped. The hiss of steam as hot steel plunges into the water is a sound as familiar to the blacksmith as birdsong is to a farmer. Different quenching liquids, water, oil, even brine, will affect the final hardness and temper of the metal. It's all very scientific, in a sweaty, slightly dangerous, and definitely not sterile kind of way. Speaking of dangerous, hanging above the workbench, you spot a collection of oddly shaped metal pieces, dies, swages, and fullers. These are specialized tools used to create specific shapes in the metal. A die might be used to create a perfectly round rivet head, while a swage could be used to form a decorative flourish. Using them requires a delicate balance of precision and brute force. One wrong move and you could end up with a mangled mess of metal or, worse, a mangled appendage. Safety first, people. Blacksmithing is not a spectator sport for your fingers. The workbench itself is a testament to the blacksmith's ingenuity and resourcefulness. Scraps of metal, bits of wood, and random tools are scattered across its surface, seemingly at random. But the blacksmith knows exactly where everything is, of course. It's organized chaos, or as some might call it, my process. You notice a half-finished project resting on the bench, a delicate iron rose, its petals slowly taking shape under the blacksmith's skilled hand. It's a beautiful contrast to the rough and tumble environment of the forge, a testament to the blacksmith's ability to create beauty from the rawest of materials. Now, a mainstream historical fact for you. Blacksmiths were absolutely essential in medieval society. They were the backbone of the economy, providing everything from agricultural tools to weapons of war. They were also highly respected members of the community, often holding positions of considerable influence. Imagine that. The person who can make a sword is pretty important when everyone else is still using sticks and sharp rocks. And for your quirky tidbit, in some cultures, blacksmiths were believed to possess magical powers. Their ability to transform metal from one form to another was seen as a form of alchemy, and they were often associated with deities and spirits. Some believed that blacksmiths could even control the weather, which explains why every time I try to barbecue, it suddenly starts raining. Coincidence? I think not. Historians still argue whether the decline of blacksmithing was solely due to industrialization or whether other factors, such as changing social structures and the rise of new technologies, also played a significant role. The transition from hand-forged goods to mass-produced items was undoubtedly a major factor, but the loss of traditional knowledge and skills also had a profound impact. It's a complicated question with no easy answers, much like trying to assemble IKEA furniture. You wander further into the forge, your eyes drawn to a rack of finished products, horseshoes, axes, and various other tools, all gleaming with a fresh coat of oil. Each piece is a testament to the blacksmith's skill and craftsmanship, a tangible representation of hours spent sweating over the forge, shaping and refining the metal to perfection. You pick up a horseshoe, its smooth curves fitting comfortably in your hand. You can almost feel the vibration of the hammer, the heat of the forge, the smell of burning coal. It's a connection to the past, a reminder of a time when things were made by hand, with care and attention to detail. You wonder if horseshoes get pedicures. Probably not. But you also spot something unusual, a small, intricately carved box made of iron. It's far more delicate and refined than anything else in the workshop, almost out of place amidst the rough and tumble tools. You cautiously open the box and find nothing. It's empty. You close it again, the lid clicking shut with a satisfying snap. You wonder what secrets it holds, or perhaps what treasures it once contained. Maybe it's a blacksmith's version of a trust fund. You realize you've been standing in the forge for quite a while now, lost in its atmosphere and history. The heat is starting to get to you, and the smell of coal dust is beginning to irritate your nose. It's time to head back outside, to the relatively cool and clean air of the world beyond. You turn to leave, but as you do, you notice something else. A small, almost hidden corner of the workshop, tucked away behind a stack of iron bars. In this corner, you see a collection of books and scrolls, bound in leather and covered in dust. You cautiously approach and pick one up. It's a book of alchemical recipes, filled with cryptic symbols and handwritten notes. You flip through the pages, your eyes widening in surprise. It seems that the blacksmith is not just a craftsman, but also a scholar, a seeker of knowledge, and maybe just a little bit of a mad scientist. You close the book and place it back on the shelf, a newfound respect for the blacksmith blooming in your heart. This is more than just a workshop, it's a sanctuary, a place of creation, experimentation, and maybe even a little bit of magic. You leave the forge with a newfound appreciation for the skill and dedication of the blacksmith, and a slight cough from all the coal dust. Right, settle in, settle in. Let's talk blacksmithing. Not the flashy Instagram reel kind with the perfect Damascus steel patterns. We're talking about real blacksmithing, the kind that chewed up and spat out the weak. We're talking apprenticeship. You trudge along a muddy lane, the morning chill seeping into your threadbare tunic. The sun, a pale disk behind the clouds, does little to warm you. Your stomach grumbles, a familiar companion these days. You've been walking for an hour, and the forge is still a ways off. You can smell the coal smoke already, though, a gritty promise of hard work and, well, not exactly pleasant company. This is it. This is day one of your apprenticeship. You're probably thinking heroic thoughts, envisioning yourself crafting gleaming swords and ornate armor. Let me gently deflate that bubble right now. You're going to be sweeping floors. Lots and lots of floors. And hauling coal. And pumping the bellows until your arms feel like they're going to fall off. The forge itself is a squat, stone building, seemingly fused to the earth. Smoke curls from its chimney like a restless spirit. As you approach, the rhythmic clang of hammer on metal grows louder, a steady pulse that reverberates in your very bones. The blacksmith, Master Elmsworth, is, let's just say he's not winning any congeniality awards. A mountain of a man, his face etched with the deep lines of hard living and hotter fires. He barely glances at you as you approach, his massive hands, stained black with soot and scarred with burns, never ceasing their work. He's currently shaping what looks like a horseshoe, each blow precise and powerful. You can feel the heat radiating from the forge, even from several feet away. The air crackles with energy. This is where the magic happens, the transformation of raw metal into something useful, something beautiful, sometimes even dangerous. Well? Don't just stand there gaping like a landed fish, he barks, his voice gravelly. Get to sweeping. The floor's a disgrace. And so your journey begins. Not with a bang, but with a broom. You quickly learn that the forge floor is a constantly evolving landscape of coal dust, metal shavings, and discarded scraps. It's a Sisyphean task, sweeping it clean only to have it return to chaos within minutes. You spend hours pumping the bellows, maintaining the fire's furious heat. The rhythmic whoosh and hiss become the soundtrack of your existence. It's mind-numbingly boring but crucial. Too little air, and the fire dies. Too much, and you risk burning the metal. It's a delicate balance, one you learn through trial and error, mostly error. The work is physically demanding. Every muscle in your body aches. Your hands are blistered and raw. You're constantly covered in grime. Sleep comes easy, a heavy, dreamless oblivion that lasts until the rooster's crow drags you back to the forge. You're probably questioning your life choices right about now. Don't worry, that's perfectly normal. Most apprentices didn't last a year. Food is utilitarian. Bread gruel, The occasional scrap of meat if Master Elmsworth is feeling generous, which is approximately never. You learn to eat quickly, to savor every bite, to be grateful for even the smallest morsel. Days bleed into weeks, weeks into months. You slowly, painstakingly, begin to learn the names of the tools, the tongs, the hammers, the anvils, each with its own specific purpose. You learn to distinguish between different types of metal: iron, steel, bronze. You learn to gauge the heat of the fire by its color, to judge the malleability of the metal by its glow. You start with simple tasks, shaping nails and rivets. The first few are misshapen monstrosities, but gradually, with practice and the occasional withering glare from Master Elmsworth, you improve. You begin to understand the feel of the metal in your hands, the way it yields to the hammer's blow, the way it sings when struck just right. One day, Master Elmsworth deems you worthy of tackling a slightly more complex project, a simple hinge. You're nervous, your hands trembling slightly as you place the metal in the fire. But you remember his instructions, the careful movements he demonstrated, the precise angles he demanded. You heat the metal, hammer it, bend it, quench it. It's a slow, deliberate process, fraught with the potential for error. But you persevere, driven by a stubborn determination to prove yourself. Finally, after what seems like an eternity, you hold the finished hinge in your hand. It's not perfect, far from it. There are imperfections, flaws that only you notice. But it's yours. You made it. From a raw piece of metal, you created something functional, something useful. A wave of pride washes over you, a feeling of accomplishment that transcends the grime and the exhaustion. Master Elmsworth examines the hinge, his expression unreadable. He turns it over in his calloused hands, testing its strength. Finally, he grunts. "Not bad," he says, his voice grudging. "Do another one." And so you do. You make hinges, dozens of them, each one slightly better than the last. You start to feel the rhythm of the work, the flow of energy from your body to the metal. You are becoming a blacksmith. This apprenticeship could last anywhere from 4 to 7 years, depending on the craft and the master's whim. Think of it like medieval college, but with more manual labor and less intellectual debate. Though, historians still argue whether the skills transfer was as efficient as modern vocational training. During your apprenticeship, you're essentially your master's property. He provides you with food and shelter, but in return, you owe him absolute obedience and unwavering service. You have no rights, no freedom, no life outside the forge. You're expected to work from dawn till dusk, 6 days a week. Sundays are reserved for church and, if you're lucky, a few hours of sleep. There are other apprentices in the forge, a motley crew of young men, each with their own stories and their own reasons for being there. You form a bond with them, a camaraderie forged in the fires of shared hardship. You share jokes, stories, and the occasional stolen scrap of food. You learn to rely on each other, to support each other through the long, grueling days. One of them, a wiry lad named Thomas, tells you stories of famous blacksmiths of old, men who could craft weapons that never broke, armor that never dented. He speaks of Wayland the Smith, a legendary figure from Norse mythology, a master craftsman who could forge anything from the finest jewelry to the most powerful swords. Wayland, as the story goes, was crippled by a king and forced to work in his forge, crafting treasures for his captor. But Wayland eventually exacted his revenge, killing the king's sons and escaping with the king's daughter. Did you know that in some cultures, blacksmiths were even believed to have magical powers? They were seen as intermediaries between the human world and the spirit world, capable of manipulating the elements to create objects of great power. Kinda like a medieval metal-bending avatar. As you progress in your apprenticeship, you begin to learn more complex techniques: welding, tempering, hardening. You learn to work with different types of steel, to create different shapes and designs. You start to develop your own style, your own signature. The blacksmithing world may have been the first incubator for the modern artist. Master Elmsworth, despite his gruff exterior, occasionally offers a word of praise or a piece of advice. You realize that he is teaching you, not just a trade, but a way of life. He is imparting to you the skills, the knowledge, and the discipline that will allow you to survive and thrive in a harsh and unforgiving world. But even in the forge, there's time for a little fun. One particularly dreary afternoon, as you're hammering away at a piece of stubborn iron, Thomas decides to liven things up. He waits for Master Elmsworth to turn his back, then lets out a perfect imitation of a crow. Master Elmsworth whirls around, his face a thundercloud. "Who did that?" he roars. Everyone points at you. You're caught, but the corner of Master Elmsworth's mouth twitches ever so slightly. He knew it wasn't you, but he secretly enjoyed the prank, or so it seems. He gives you extra cleaning duties, but doesn't dock your food portion. It's not always easy. You'll face setbacks, failures, moments when you want to give up. But you'll keep going. Because you are tougher than you think. And because deep down, you have a burning desire to create, to build, to transform the raw materials of the world into something beautiful and lasting. This is the hard way. This is the blacksmith's way. Now back to work. I know you're tired, but that glowing metal isn't going to hammer itself, now is it? Alright, settle in, friend. Let's talk iron. Before you can even think about shaping a sword, a horseshoe, or even a humble nail, you need the stuff. Where does it come from anyway? It's not like you can just stroll down to the Iron Emporium and pick up a few ingots. Though, wouldn't that be convenient? You find yourself in a world where the nearest thing to a hardware store is probably a particularly resourceful gnome. Sourcing your metals is a process. You're tramping through a muddy forest, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. You're following a hunch, a whisper of a legend about a bog rich in bog iron. Seems glamorous, doesn't it? Bog iron. Sounds like something a woodland sprite would use to make tiny teacups. But here you are, hip deep in muck digging. Bog iron, you see, isn't some shiny vein of ore. It's essentially iron ore that forms in waterlogged environments. Over centuries, iron leaches from the surrounding soil and precipitates out, creating a reddish-brown, lumpy material. It's basically rusty dirt, but useful rusty dirt. You hack away with your pickaxe, feeling the satisfying thud as it bites into the earth. Your back aches, your boots are full of water, and you're pretty sure a leech is currently auditioning for a role on your leg. Such is the life of a blacksmith to be. The thing is, bog iron was a pretty common source for early iron production, especially in areas without easily accessible deposits of other ores. It was relatively easy to find and didn't require deep mining. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of scavenging for scrap metal, only much, much dirtier. You hoist a particularly heavy chunk of the stuff. Feels like you're carrying half a drowned badger. And speaking of badgers, there's a fringe theory that some ancient blacksmiths used badger urine in the smelting process. Apparently, the ammonia in the urine helped to remove impurities from the iron. Now, I'm not saying you should try this, but just imagine the marketing potential. Forged with the purity of badger's finest. Another place you might find yourself searching for iron is near the surface. Iron ore deposits sometimes outcrop or get exposed due to erosion. You might stumble across a vein of hematite, magnetite, or limonite, all different kinds of iron ore. These sources were preferred, due to their higher iron content. If you're really unlucky though, you might find yourself conscripted into a proper mining operation. Deep underground, flickering torchlight dances across the faces of exhausted workers. The air is thick with dust, and the rhythmic clang of hammers and picks echoes through the tunnels. Mining was dangerous, backbreaking work. Cave-ins, floods, and exhaustion were constant threats. You hack away at the rock face, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling that the roof might collapse at any moment. Ah, the simple pleasures of historical accuracy. Now, once you've got your hands on some ore, the real fun begins: smelting. And by fun, I mean a long, arduous process that involves a lot of heat, a lot of charcoal, and a lot of hoping that everything goes according to plan. You're standing in front of a clay furnace you have built, sweat dripping off your brow as the heat radiates outwards. This isn't your modern blast furnace with its automated controls and precise temperature regulation. This is a bloomery, a much simpler and less efficient affair. You carefully layer charcoal and ore inside the furnace. The charcoal acts as fuel, providing the heat needed to reduce the iron oxide in the ore to metallic iron. The air blast, provided by bellows, which you're currently pumping with all your might, helps to intensify the combustion. You pump and pump and pump some more. Your arms are screaming in protest, and your lungs feel like they're about to explode. But you keep going, fueled by the faint hope that you'll actually get some usable iron out of this whole ordeal. It's hot, dirty, and utterly exhausting work. But hey, at least you're getting a good workout. The process takes hours, sometimes days. You have to constantly monitor the temperature, adjust the airflow, and add more fuel as needed. If you're lucky, the result will be a spongy mass of iron and slag called a bloom. This bloom is then removed from the furnace and hammered to consolidate the iron and remove more of the slag. This process is repeated several times, gradually refining the iron and making it more workable. Interestingly, the early Romans were quite savvy about their metal sourcing. They understood that different regions produced iron with different qualities, and they would often seek out iron from specific areas known for their superior metal. For example, Norican steel, from the region around modern-day Austria, was highly prized for its strength and durability. It's like the medieval equivalent of knowing your artisanal coffee beans. Historians still argue whether the Romans had a full grasp of the science behind metallurgy, or if they simply relied on empirical knowledge passed down through generations. Did they understand the role of carbon in steel production, or did they just know that certain processes resulted in better metal? It's a fascinating debate that highlights the limitations of our own understanding of the past. Now, about that slag. It's not entirely useless, you know. While it's mostly waste material, slag could be used for other purposes. It could be crushed and used as a component in construction materials, or even as fertilizer. One fringe belief even suggests that some blacksmiths use slag to predict the future, interpreting the patterns and colors in the cooled slag as omens. I mean, if you're spending that much time staring at slag, you might as well get something out of it, right? The final step is to forge the refined iron into something useful. You heat the iron in your forge until it glows a bright orange, then you hammer it on your anvil, shaping it according to your needs. The rhythmic clang of hammer on metal fills the air, a sound that has echoed through blacksmith shops for centuries. You're bending, twisting, and shaping the metal, slowly but surely transforming it into something new. Each strike of the hammer is a testament to your skill and patience. And there you have it, iron, forged from the earth, refined by fire, and shaped by your own hands. It's a long, difficult process, but it's also incredibly rewarding. You have taken something raw and unformed and transformed it into something useful, something beautiful, something that will last for generations. Of course, not all blacksmiths were created equal. Some were incredibly skilled, able to produce weapons and tools of exceptional quality. Others, well, let's just say their creations were more likely to end up as decorative garden gnomes. It's important to remember that skill, as in any craft, took years to acquire. We may not always remember that iron played an absolutely crucial role in the development of civilization. It allowed for the creation of stronger tools, more effective weapons, and more durable structures. It helped to transform societies and shape the course of history. Pretty impressive for some rusty dirt, eh? The life of a blacksmith wasn't easy. Long hours, hard work, and constant exposure to heat and smoke took their toll. But blacksmiths were also respected members of their communities, valued for their skills and their ability to provide essential goods. They were the engineers, the artisans, and the innovators of their time. You are a vital cog in the machine of civilization, even if your current state resembles a sweaty, charcoal-covered cog. And as you stand there, admiring your newly forged creation, you can't help but feel a sense of pride. You have taken something from the earth and transformed it into something new, something useful, something beautiful. And in doing so, you have joined a long line of blacksmiths who have shaped the world with their skill and their dedication. Now off you go, to create something amazing. And maybe invest in some leech repellent. Alright, friend, pull up a stool, though I doubt there's one comfy enough for what we're about to experience. We're stepping into the boots, or rather, the leather sandals, hopefully not too close to the hot coals, of a medieval blacksmith. Prepare yourself for a day that makes your modern 9-to-5 look like a spa retreat. The first thing that hits you, even before the heat, is the smell. It's a pungent cocktail of coal smoke, hot metal, sweat, mostly yours, and a hint of something vaguely animal. Probably the tanning process for those sandals we mentioned. You're awake before the sun even thinks about peeking over the horizon. No snooze button here. Your rooster alarm clock is far too enthusiastic, and your stomach is already grumbling louder than a disgruntled dragon. Breakfast? Think dense, dark bread, maybe a bit of cheese if you're lucky, and watered-down ale. This isn't a brunch situation with avocado toast and mimosas. This is fuel, pure and simple, to get you through the brutal day ahead. You'd be surprised how quickly you acquire a taste for it, though. Necessity, as they say, is the mother of slightly stale bread. Now, before you even consider touching that anvil, you have to tend the fire. This is more than just tossing a few logs into a fireplace. This is coaxing a ravenous beast to life. You're shoveling coal, adjusting the bellows, and carefully controlling the airflow to achieve the perfect temperature. Too little air, and the fire sputters, offering you only lukewarm frustration. Too much, and you risk burning through your fuel faster than a kid through Halloween candy. Mastering this is an art form. Some blacksmiths even swore by specific chants and rituals to appease the fire spirits, which, honestly, after a few days of this, sounds perfectly reasonable. Historians still argue whether these rituals were genuinely believed or merely a way to maintain focus during a repetitive and demanding task. Speaking of demanding, once the fire is roaring, you're ready to actually do something. Today's agenda? A peasant needs a new plowshare. The local knight is impatiently awaiting repairs to his helmet. Apparently, dragons are tough on headgear, and the village butcher wants a sharper cleaver. Oh, and the wheelwright needs new iron bands for his wagon wheels. So yeah, a light day. You start with the plowshare, because appeasing the peasantry is generally a good survival strategy. You select a suitable piece of raw iron, which, let's be honest, probably looks more like a rusty lump than anything recognizable. This iron might have been mined locally, or it could have traveled a considerable distance, depending on the availability of resources in your region. England, for example, relied heavily on imported iron from Spain during certain periods. Now comes the fun part, heating the iron until it glows a fiery orange. Then, with tongs in one hand and a hammer in the other, you begin to shape it. The clang of hammer on metal is deafening, a constant rhythm that echoes through the village. Each strike requires precision and strength, muscle memory guiding your movements. You're not just hitting the metal, you're coaxing it, persuading it to take the form you desire. Think of it like sculpting, but with a tool that weighs more than your cat and temperatures that could melt lead. Sparks fly, sweat stings your eyes, and the heat radiates outward, making you feel like you're slowly roasting inside your own skin. You pause occasionally to plunge the metal into a quenching trough of water, the sudden hiss and cloud of steam a temporary reprieve from the inferno. Remember that knight waiting for his helmet repair? Knights, back in the day, were surprisingly vain. They wanted their armor to look good, not just be functional. Apparently, dented dragon scales are so last season. You carefully examine the helmet, noting the damage. A dragon's claw, no doubt. With a sigh, you begin to carefully hammer out the dents, trying to restore the helmet to its former glory. It's delicate work, requiring a steady hand and a keen eye. One wrong move, and you could ruin the entire piece. And here's a quirky little factoid: some blacksmiths even incorporated secret marks into their work, a kind of medieval signature. It's like the blacksmith's version of a Banksy mural, only slightly less likely to be sold for millions. As the sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across your workshop, you finally manage to finish the plowshare, repair the helmet, mostly, and sharpen the cleaver. The wheelwright will have to wait until tomorrow. Your muscles ache, your ears are ringing, and you're covered in soot from head to toe. You feel like you could sleep for a week. But there's still more to do. You need to clean your tools, replenish your coal supply, and prepare for another day of the same, only different. Dinner is another hearty, if somewhat monotonous, affair. Maybe some stew, more bread, and perhaps a bit of whatever the butcher couldn't sell. You eat quickly, knowing that rest is essential. Medieval blacksmiths didn't exactly have ergonomically designed workstations. Aches and pains were just part of the job description. And the life expectancy wasn't exactly stellar either. Before collapsing into your straw-filled mattress, you might take a moment to admire your work. There's a certain satisfaction in creating something tangible, something useful, with your own two hands. You provided the tools that helped feed the village, protected the night somewhat, and allowed the butcher to, well, you get the idea. And here's your history tidbit for this section. Blacksmiths held a position of respect, yes, because they forged weapons and tools, but also because they understood the properties of metal, a kind of medieval science. They were often considered to be knowledgeable and skilled, even possessing a certain magical aura. Some believed they could even imbue objects with special powers. So, maybe you can get away with charging extra for the dragon-slaying helmet repair. Of course, even skilled blacksmiths weren't immune to the occasional workplace hazard. There were burns, cuts, and the ever-present danger of inhaling toxic fumes. And then there was the risk of, wait for it, spontaneous combustion. Yes, apparently there were cases of blacksmiths, or their workshops, spontaneously bursting into flames. The cause? Probably a combination of flammable materials, poor ventilation, and a healthy dose of medieval superstition. Some scholars suggest it could be attributed to the buildup of static electricity in a particularly dry environment. Others whisper about cursed metal. And here's your open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the blacksmith's social standing was primarily determined by their skill or by their access to resources. Did the best blacksmith always rise to the top, or did those with connections and wealth have an inherent advantage? It's a question that gets to the heart of medieval social structures. As you drift off to sleep, the clang of the hammer still echoes in your ears. You dream of glowing metal, fiery dragons, and peasants demanding sharper plowshares. It's a hard life, no doubt. But it's also a life of purpose, a life of craftsmanship, a life that shapes the world, one hammer blow at a time. Just try not to spontaneously combust, okay? Good night. Well, no, not yet. Just hang on, we've still got a few hours of this blacksmith's life to experience. Now, about that pesky wheelwright. Alright, settle in, friend. Let's talk about how medieval blacksmithing wasn't exactly a spa day. You trudge into the forge. The smell hits you first, a potent cocktail of burning coal, hot metal, and something vaguely organic. Probably a forgotten sandwich behind the bellows. You pull on your leather apron, thick and stiff, offering at least some semblance of protection. It smells like hard work and maybe a little bit of armpit. The heat is the first thing that really gets you. It's not just warm, it's a suffocating blanket, clinging to you and stealing your breath. You can feel the sweat prickling on your forehead even before you've touched a tool. This is the forge, your office, your oven. Hope you like being roasted. You squint, adjusting to the light. The heart of the forge is the fire itself, a roaring inferno consuming coal with an insatiable appetite. It's mesmerizing, beautiful in its raw power. You poke at it with the poker, coaxing the flames, trying to find the sweet spot, that perfect cherry red glow that tells you the metal is ready. It's an art, this dance with the fire. Historians still argue whether the quality of a blacksmith's coal was more important than their skill, but you suspect it was a bit of both. Good coal certainly makes your life easier. Bad coal makes you want to chuck your hammer into the nearest river. And speaking of hammers, you grip the handle of your trusty hammer. It's heavy, well-worn, a comfortable extension of your own arm. You swing it experimentally, feeling the familiar weight. This is your weapon, your instrument, your partner in creation. But it's also a hazard. You're constantly swinging this thing, sometimes for hours on end. Carpal tunnel wasn't really a recognized medical condition back then, but trust me, blacksmiths knew all about the aches and pains. It's repetitive strain injury, medieval style. The anvil awaits, a massive block of iron, cold and solid. This is where the magic happens, where the metal is shaped and formed. You carefully retrieve a piece of iron from the forge, tongs in hand. The heat radiating off it is intense, even through the tongs. It glows a vibrant orange, almost alive. You place it on the anvil, carefully positioning it. Time to work. The rhythmic clang of hammer on metal fills the air. Each strike is precise, deliberate. You're shaping the iron, coaxing it into the form you envision. Sparks fly with every blow, tiny incandescent projectiles that dance in the air before disappearing. You wince as one lands a little too close to your eye. Safety glasses? Yeah, those weren't exactly standard issue. Burns are an occupational hazard. You get them, everyone gets them. Small ones from flying sparks, bigger ones from accidentally brushing against hot metal. You might even get a splash of molten metal if you're really unlucky. You just grit your teeth and keep working. Maybe dab some honey on it later. Honey was basically the medieval equivalent of Neosporin, except it also tasted delicious. The heat, the sparks, the constant hammering. It all takes a toll. You're sweating profusely, your muscles ache, and your ears are ringing. But you keep going. This is your livelihood, your craft, your art. You are a blacksmith. You take a break, stepping away from the forge to catch your breath. You wipe the sweat from your brow with a dirty rag. Time for a drink. You reach for your water skin, taking a long, refreshing gulp. Water was precious, especially in the summer. You wouldn't dare waste a drop. Looking around the workshop, you see evidence of the other hazards lurking in the shadows. Sharp tools, piles of scrap metal, uneven floors, tripping hazards galore. And let's not forget the ever-present risk of tetanus. A small cut from a rusty piece of iron could easily turn into a life-threatening infection. They didn't have antibiotics back then. You remember the story of Saint Eligius, the patron saint of blacksmiths. He was a skilled metalworker who became known for his piety and generosity. Legend has it that he once shot a horse by removing its leg, shoeing the leg separately, and then reattaching it. Okay, that's one way to avoid a kicking hazard. Fringe historians claim this proves he was an alien with advanced technology. More likely, it's just a really embellished story. You sigh, returning to your work. The metal is cooling, losing its malleability. You need to work quickly. You heat it again, bringing it back to that perfect orange glow. More hammering, more shaping, more sparks. The clang of metal echoes through the workshop. But it's not just the immediate physical dangers. Prolonged exposure to the smoke and fumes from the forge takes its toll on your lungs. Blacksmith's lung was a real thing, even if they didn't call it that. Constant inhalation of coal dust and metal particles can lead to chronic respiratory problems. You cough, feeling the familiar tickle in your throat. You try to ignore it, focusing on your work. The air quality wasn't exactly great, considering all the coal burning. And it wasn't just the forge itself. Remember that open scholarly debate about medieval air quality? Historians still argue whether the rise of coal burning in cities caused a significant increase in respiratory illnesses. Common sense suggests it probably wasn't beneficial, but proving it definitively is tricky. You can't exactly go back in time and take air samples. And then there's the noise. The constant hammering, the roaring fire, the clanging of metal, it all adds up. Hearing loss was another common problem among blacksmiths. You've already noticed you don't hear as well as you used to. You guess you'll just have to yell louder when you order your ale at the tavern. The physical demands of the job also contribute to a variety of other health problems. Back pain, joint pain, arthritis, the list goes on. You're constantly lifting heavy objects, swinging a hammer, and working in awkward positions. It takes a toll on your body. You're basically a medieval athlete, except instead of winning gold medals, you're making horseshoes. You occasionally think about doing something else, something less physically demanding. Maybe become a scribe, carefully copying manuscripts in a quiet, well-lit room. But then you remember your handwriting is atrocious. Plus, the constant squinting would probably give you a headache. Blacksmithing may be hard, but at least it's familiar. You pause again, examining your work. The piece is taking shape, slowly but surely. It's a simple horseshoe, but it needs to be perfect. A poorly made horseshoe can cause a horse to go lame, which is bad for the horse and bad for the owner. You take pride in your work, knowing that you're providing a valuable service to the community. It was actually Charlemagne, the Frankish king and Holy Roman Emperor, who mandated that all horses in his kingdom be shod. He understood the importance of well-shod horses for his armies and for trade. Charlemagne was a smart cookie. Suddenly, you realize you haven't eaten all day. Your stomach rumbles loudly. You grab a hunk of bread and some cheese from your satchel, devouring it quickly. It's not much, but it'll have to do. You don't have time for a proper meal. You need to finish this horseshoe. You return to the forge, the heat welcoming you back like a grumpy old friend. More hammering, more shaping, more sparks. You are in the zone, focused on your work. The outside world fades away, leaving only you, the metal, and the fire. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the workshop, you finally finish the horseshoe. You examine it closely, making sure it's perfect. You're satisfied. It's a good horseshoe, a strong horseshoe, a horseshoe that will protect a horse's hoof for many miles. You quench the hot metal in a bucket of water. A cloud of steam rises, filling the air with a hissing sound. You carefully set the horseshoe aside to cool. Your work for the day is done. You might not be rich, but you earned an honest day's wage. You clean up your workshop, putting away your tools and sweeping the floor. You take one last look at the forge, the dying embers glowing softly. You'll be back tomorrow, ready to face the heat, the hammers, and the hazards. Because that's what you do. You're a blacksmith. And now, you're exhausted. Time for some sleep. Maybe dream of cooler temperatures. Or perhaps of inventing safety goggles. Alright, settle in, friends. Let's get comfy. Maybe brew a chamomile tea. We're diving deep today, not into a bubbling cauldron, though blacksmiths did work with some pretty hot stuff, but into the social standing of the medieval blacksmith. Imagine, you trudge down a muddy path, the air thick with the smell of wood smoke and something metallic. It's not the crisp, clean metallic tang of, say, stainless steel cutlery. No, this is a richer, earthier scent, mingled with the sweat of labor and the faint, persistent aroma of coal. You're headed to the heart of the village, and that heart, in many ways, beats in the blacksmith's forge. You see him now. He's not exactly ripped like some Instagram fitness influencer. More powerfully built. Years of hammering have given him arms like cured oak, and his face, perpetually smudged with soot, holds a quiet intensity. He's focused, watching the dance of the flames with an almost mystical concentration. This isn't just some guy hitting metal. He's an artist, a craftsman, and dare I say, a bit of a magician. Seriously, turning raw ore into a gleaming sword? That's pretty wizard-like. Now you might think, okay, blacksmith, cool. But why are we hanging out here instead of, the castle? Well, because the blacksmith wasn't just a guy who made horseshoes. He was a crucial, indispensable member of the medieval community. He was the equivalent of your mechanic, your hardware store owner, and your therapist? Okay, maybe not therapist. Though I'd bet a good hammering session could be pretty cathartic. Think about it. Need a plowshare for the next planting season? Blacksmith. Want to mend a broken gate latch to keep those pesky sheep out of your cabbage patch? Blacksmith. Require nails for the new roof on the church? You guessed it, blacksmith. He provided the essential tools and implements that kept the village functioning. He wasn't just making stuff, he was making life possible. And in a time when resources were scarce and travel was difficult, that kind of reliability was worth its weight in, well, iron, probably. And it wasn't just the peasants who relied on him. The local lord, the knights, even the clergy, all depended on the blacksmith's skills. Swords, armor, elaborate ironwork for the church doors, all crafted by his skilled hands. His workshop wasn't just a dusty shed, it was a vital artery in the economic body of the village. He was the reason why the local armor looked better, a status symbol that showed the local lord wasn't just some rando with a shiny helmet. The blacksmith's position also carried a certain amount of respect. People might have been a little wary of him, what with all the fire and the hammering and frankly, the danger. It was a tough job, and everyone knew it. Plus, there was always a hint of mystery surrounding the craft. Working with fire and metal felt almost alchemical. like they were performing some kind of ancient ritual. Ever notice how blacksmiths always seem to have that knowing look in their eyes? Like they know some secret about the universe that you don't? Mainstream historical fact time: blacksmiths often held a higher social standing than other artisans in the village due to the specialized skills and resources required for their trade. Iron was incredibly valuable, and the ability to work it made them indispensable. That's right, they were the medieval equivalent of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, only instead of coding they were, forging. Quirky tidbit time: in some cultures, blacksmiths were believed to possess magical powers and were often consulted for their knowledge of herbs and healing. Apparently, knowing how to manipulate metal also somehow made you a medical expert. Who knew? Maybe that's why they sometimes smelled like lavender in addition to coal dust. So, he was a craftsman and your local witch doctor, all rolled into one soot-covered package. Talk about a multitasker. And here's where things get a little more complicated. Historians still argue whether the blacksmith's social status was universally high. In some regions, they were indeed revered, treated with respect and even fear. But in others, they were viewed with suspicion, even considered social outcasts. Their association with fire and metal, their sometimes isolated workshops, and the sheer power they wielded, literally, with a hammer, could lead to feelings of unease among the more superstitious villagers. It could lead to a feeling of them being othered. You see a huge guy who can make weapons all day? That could be scary. Consider the economic realities. While the blacksmith provided essential goods and services, he also controlled access to them. He could set his own prices, within reason, of course, and in times of scarcity, he could exert considerable influence over the community. This economic power could be a source of resentment, particularly if the blacksmith was perceived as being greedy or unfair. Remember that gate latch you needed fixed? Well, if the blacksmith decided he needed a new chicken coop more than you needed a functional gate, you might be waiting a while. And then there's the question of craftsmanship. Not every blacksmith was a master craftsman. Some were just adequate. They could bang out a horseshoe or two, but their swords were prone to shattering and their plowshares were more likely to break than to break ground. In a world where quality mattered, and your survival often depended on the quality of your tools, a shoddy blacksmith could quickly lose the respect and the business of the community. So, the blacksmith's social standing wasn't always a straightforward matter of reverence and reliance. It was a complex interplay of need, fear, respect, and suspicion. He was a vital member of the village, but he was also an outsider, a figure of both power and vulnerability. Kinda like that one weird guy who always shows up at the Renaissance fair dressed as a dragon. You need him to fix your bracers, but you're not exactly inviting him over for dinner. Let's consider another factor: the blacksmith's role in the larger feudal system. While he was essential to the village, he was ultimately under the control of the local lord. The lord could demand his services, set prices for certain goods, and even confiscate his tools if he was deemed to be disloyal or unproductive. This meant that the blacksmith's autonomy was limited, and his social standing was always contingent on the lord's favor. It's like being a freelance contractor, but instead of getting paid in exposure, you get paid in, not being thrown in the dungeon. Here's a light joke for you. What do you call a blacksmith who's always late? A slow forgiver. I'll see myself out. No, wait, I have more to say. Furthermore, the blacksmith's skills were often passed down through families, creating a kind of blacksmithing dynasty within the village. This could lead to feelings of exclusivity and resentment from those who were excluded from the trade. If you weren't born into a blacksmithing family, you were unlikely to ever become one, regardless of your talent or ambition. It's like trying to join a secret society, but instead of a handshake, you need to know how to smelt iron. It also gives some idea how the status was maintained for longer periods of time. Okay, another quirky fact for you: blacksmiths sometimes incorporated secret symbols and markings into their work, often as a form of personal identification or to ward off evil spirits. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of leaving your Instagram handle on your artwork. Though, instead of followers, they were hoping to attract good luck. So, next time you picture a medieval village, don't just think of knights and castles. Remember the blacksmith, standing by his forge, shaping the world around him with fire and steel. He was more than just a craftsman. He was a pillar of the community, a source of both respect and suspicion, and a vital link between the raw materials of the earth and the everyday lives of the villagers. His role wasn't just about making things, it was about making civilization possible. And that, my friends, is something to think about as you drift off to sleep. Okay, settle in, friend. Let's talk about pointy things and clangy bits, shall we? That's right, we're diving headfirst into the world of the medieval blacksmith, the unsung hero, or perhaps more accurately, the deafened hero of medieval warfare. You trudge toward the blacksmith's forge, the rhythmic clang of hammer on metal your soundtrack. The air, thick with coal smoke and the metallic tang of iron, stings your nostrils. It's not exactly aromatherapy, but hey, nobody ever said medieval life smelled like roses. More like a sweaty night after a long ride, probably. The blacksmith's shop is a chaotic ballet of heat and precision. Embers spit from the forge like angry fireflies, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. A burly figure, sweat plastering dark hair to his forehead, pulls a glowing ingot from the heart of the fire with tongs that look like they could snap your spine. He's wearing leather, thick, oiled leather, because apparently, third-degree burns weren't in vogue back then. You watch, fascinated, as he lays the incandescent metal upon the anvil. This anvil, by the way, isn't just some hunk of iron, it's the blacksmith's stage, his partner in this fiery performance. He raises his hammer, a hefty thing, the size of a small dog, and brings it down with a resounding crash. Sparks erupt, painting brief, fleeting stars in the dim interior. You feel the heat radiating from the forge, even from several feet away. Imagine spending your entire day next to that inferno. No wonder blacksmiths tended to be, well, let's just say they weren't known for their sunny dispositions. Though, I suppose, perpetually being yelled at for swords breaking mid-battle wouldn't improve anyone's mood. Each strike of the hammer is deliberate, shaping the stubborn metal with focused force. You can see the nascent form of a sword blade emerging, a rough, unrefined thing, but undeniably there. It's mesmerizing, this transformation of raw material into a tool of war. It's also surprisingly loud. Seriously, how did these guys not go completely deaf? Maybe that explains the aforementioned grumpy demeanor. Blacksmiths weren't just banging out swords, though. They were responsible for crafting everything from horseshoes, because apparently, those poor warhorses weren't walking on sunshine either, to intricate suits of armor. Think about that for a moment, each plate of armor, painstakingly shaped and fitted, designed to protect a knight from, well, pretty much everything short of a dragon attack. Speaking of which, you have to wonder if any blacksmith ever secretly hoped a dragon would attack, just so he could test the limits of his craftsmanship. Finally, a real challenge. And it wasn't just the shaping of the metal that was important. The quality of the steel itself was crucial. This is where the secrets of tempering and quenching came into play. You see the blacksmith plunge the glowing blade into a trough of water with a hiss and a cloud of steam. This rapid cooling process hardens the steel, making it stronger and more resilient. Too much heat, or too little, and the blade would be brittle or too soft. It was a delicate balance, a dance between fire and water, skill and intuition. Historians still argue whether the secrets of truly superior steel, like Damascus steel, were lost to time, or if we simply haven't replicated the precise conditions and techniques used centuries ago. The patterns, the strength, the legend of Damascus steel continue to fascinate researchers and metalworkers alike. Some say it's all about the specific impurities in the ore. Others believe it lies in the intricate folding and hammering process. Whatever the truth, it's a reminder that even in the age of modern metallurgy, there's still magic in the old ways. You notice a pile of what looks like animal bones near the forge. Curious, you ask the blacksmith what they're for. He grunts and explains that bone char, essentially charred animal bones, was sometimes used in the hardening process. Apparently, the carbon in the bone could improve the steel's properties. Medieval recycling at its finest, right? I mean, waste not, want not, even if it does sound a bit witchy. Moving on, let's talk about armor. You see a half-finished breastplate hanging on a rack, its surface gleaming dully in the firelight. Creating a full suit of armor was an incredibly time-consuming and expensive undertaking, reserved only for the wealthiest nobles and knights. We're talking months, if not years, of work, and the cost could be equivalent to a small fortune. And for what? To get clanked around in like a medieval tin can? Well, yeah, pretty much. But it was a protective tin can, and in a world where getting stabbed was a real occupational hazard, that was worth a lot. Each piece of armor had to be custom fitted to the wearer, ensuring both protection and mobility. Imagine trying to fight in armor that was too tight or too loose. You'd be like a turtle stuck on its back, a very shiny, very expensive turtle, but a turtle nonetheless. And let's be honest, the chafing alone must have been unbearable. Think about wearing layers of metal all day, every day. No wonder knights developed a reputation for being a bit touchy. Did you know that some suits of armor were so elaborate, they were essentially wearable art? Intricate engravings, gilded surfaces, and even personalized crests turned these suits into symbols of status and power. Think of them as the medieval equivalent of a luxury sports car, only instead of impressing potential dates, you were trying to intimidate your enemies. Though I suppose sometimes those two things were one and the same. Now let's debunk a myth. Knights weren't helpless once they were knocked to the ground. Okay, sure, getting knocked off your horse in full armor was a bad situation, but they weren't completely defenseless. They were trained to fight on the ground, using their daggers and even their armored limbs to their advantage. Think of them as heavily armed, highly motivated, bowling balls. Okay, maybe that's a stretch, but you get the idea. The blacksmith gestures to a rack of helmets, each one a different shape and size. Some are simple, utilitarian affairs, others are adorned with elaborate crests and visors. You pick up a great helm, the classic, bucket-shaped helmet of the medieval knight. It's surprisingly heavy, and when you put it on, your world shrinks to a narrow slit. Claustrophobic much? You can barely see or hear anything. How did they fight like this? The answer, of course, is training. Years and years of grueling practice, honing their reflexes and instincts to compensate for the limitations of their equipment. One quirky historical detail you might appreciate: apparently some knights would wear perfume inside their helmets. I know, right? Seems a bit contradictory. But think about it, trapped inside a metal bucket all day, sweating profusely. Yeah, a little floral scent probably went a long way. Though hopefully they chose something a little more masculine than lavender. Imagine facing down a fearsome knight only to catch a whiff of potpourri. Intimidation factor 0. The role of the blacksmith extended far beyond the battlefield. They also crafted tools for farmers, cooking utensils for households, and even decorative items for churches and castles. They were essential to the functioning of medieval society, providing the tools and equipment that kept everything running. They were the unsung backbone of the medieval world. Or at least they would be unsung, if the constant hammering didn't make it impossible to hear anything else. As you prepared to leave, you glanced back at the blacksmith, still hammering away at the glowing metal. He's a master of his craft, a shaper of steel, a wielder of fire. He is, in a very real sense, the architect of medieval warfare. And as you walk away, you can't help but feel a newfound respect for the men and women who forged the instruments of war. Just try not to think too much about where those instruments ended up, okay? Sweet dreams, or whatever. Alright, welcome back, settle in, grab a comfy blanket. Today, we're ditching the swords and armor for something a little earthier. We're talking about plowshares. Yes, those humble blades that turn the soil, the unsung heroes of, well, pretty much everything. Without them, we wouldn't have agriculture as we know it, and without agriculture, yeah, you can fill in the blanks there. Think of it, no more late-night snack runs. Shudder. You trudge across a freshly plowed field. The smell of damp earth fills your nostrils, a surprisingly pleasant aroma, like a really expensive scented candle, if your scented candles smelled of dirt and worms. Okay, maybe not. But still, it's an honest smell. A smell of potential. You watch as a farmer guides his oxen, Or maybe a sturdy horse, depending on the era and region, pulling a plow. The share, that wedge of metal, slices through the soil, turning it over in neat furrows. It's slow work, back-breaking work, but it's the foundation of civilization itself. You can almost hear the soil sigh in contentment as it's aerated and prepared for planting. You can almost, but not quite. It's just dirt, after all. Now that plowshare. That simple, elegant curve of sharpened metal. That's where our friend the blacksmith comes in. He's not just banging out swords and shields, you know. He's crafting the tools that feed the world. And let me tell you, making a good plowshare is no easy feat. It needs to be strong enough to withstand constant abrasion against soil, rocks, and the occasional grumpy badger. It needs to hold its edge, and it needs to be shaped just right to efficiently turn the earth. Imagine spending hours hammering hot metal, trying to get the curve just so. Talk about a workout. My Fitbit would be going crazy. You stand in the blacksmith's workshop. The air is thick with the smell of coal smoke and hot iron. Sparks fly as he hammers a glowing piece of metal on the anvil, the rhythmic clang resonating through the small space. He's a master craftsman, his hands calloused and strong, his movements precise and economical. He knows exactly how much heat to apply, how hard to strike, and when to quench the metal in the water trough with a hiss of steam. He probably knows more about metallurgy than your average medieval metallurgist. Okay, maybe not. He's shaping a new plowshare, carefully heating and hammering the metal, testing its edge, ensuring its strength. It's a painstaking process, requiring both skill and intuition. One wrong strike and the whole piece could be ruined, hours of work wasted. You watch, mesmerized, as he transforms a shapeless lump of metal into a vital tool. It's like watching a magician, except instead of pulling rabbits out of hats, he's pulling food out of the ground. Metaphorically, of course. Now, let's talk a little history. The history of the plow is a long and winding one, stretching back millennia. Early plows were simple affairs, often just a forked branch dragged through the soil. They scratched the surface rather than turning it over. Think of it like trying to spread butter with a spoon. Messy and inefficient. But over time, humans got smarter, adding metal tips, improving the shape, and eventually developing the heavy, wheeled plows that allowed them to cultivate heavier soils. These developments allowed for more efficient farming and increased crop yields. Historians still argue whether the heavy plow directly led to the manorial system of medieval Europe, but it certainly played a significant role in shaping society. It's hard to have lords and peasants without a reliable food supply. And it's even harder to have reliable food without a reliable plow. Fun fact: in some cultures, the plow was considered a sacred object, and plowing rituals were performed to ensure a good harvest. Imagine that, blessing your farm equipment. It's kinda sweet in a pre-industrial way, but let's be honest, you'd probably get some weird looks if you started chanting over your combine harvester today. You leave the blacksmith's workshop and walk back into the field. The sun is starting to set, casting long shadows across the freshly plowed furrows. The air is cooler now, and the smell of earth seems even richer, more potent. You can almost taste the promise of a bountiful harvest. Almost. Now, the harvest. All that work, all that preparation, all that plowing, it all culminates in the harvest. It's a time of intense activity, as farmers race to gather their crops before the weather turns. Fields are filled with people, scything, reaping, and binding sheaves of grain. It's a communal effort, everyone working together to bring in the bounty. You can almost hear the folk music, the laughter, the sheer relief of a job well done. Almost. The blacksmith plays a role here, too. He sharpens scythes, repairs sickles, and makes sure that all the tools of harvest are in good working order. A dull scythe is a farmer's worst enemy. It wastes time, exhausts energy, and can even lead to injuries. He's the unsung hero of the harvest, keeping the cutting edge sharp and the work flowing smoothly. He's like the pit crew for the farming world. Harvest festivals were common in many cultures, celebrating the end of the growing season and giving thanks for the abundance of food. Think cornucopias overflowing with fruits and vegetables, feasting, dancing, and general merriment. Basically, the original Thanksgiving, but with more mead and less awkward family conversations. Or maybe the awkward family conversations were still there, just fueled by mead. But the harvest is also a time of anxiety. Will the weather hold? Will the crops be plentiful enough to feed everyone through the winter? Will there be enough surplus to sell or trade? These questions weigh heavily on the minds of farmers. A bad harvest can mean starvation, hardship, and even death. It's a precarious existence, dependent on the whims of nature. You can almost feel the tension in the air, the undercurrent of worry beneath the celebratory atmosphere. Almost. Historians still argue whether climate change significantly impacted medieval agriculture, but there is little doubt that unpredictable weather patterns could have devastating consequences for local communities. A single drought, flood, or late frost could wipe out an entire year's worth of work, leaving people vulnerable and desperate. It was a time when the stakes were incredibly high, and the margin for error was incredibly small. It puts our modern-day worries about the price of avocados into perspective, doesn't it? So, next time you sit down to a meal, take a moment to think about the plowshare, the blacksmith, and the farmer. They are the ones who have made it all possible. They are the unsung heroes of our civilization, the ones who have transformed the earth and fed the world. And maybe, just maybe, leave a little extra tip for your farmer at the farmer's market. They deserve it. Now, let's get some sleep, and dream of perfectly plowed fields. Okay, let's get comfy, maybe dim the lights a bit. We're diving deep into the stuff of daily life back when the blacksmith was basically the Amazon Prime of pre-industrial society. And yeah, I know what you're thinking, blacksmiths. Horseshoes and swords, right? Well, settle in, Buttercup, because there's a whole universe of mundane, yet essential, items forged in those fiery workshops. Imagine, if you will, that you're waking up in a pre-electricity world. The sun's barely peeking over the horizon and you're freezing. You shuffle towards the hearth, shivering, hoping the embers from last night are still glowing. You reach for the fire poker, a simple iron rod forged by the blacksmith, to coax the flames back to life. Not exactly glamorous, but without it, you're eating cold porridge again, and nobody wants that. Historians still argue whether the design of the fire poker was purely functional or if blacksmiths subtly incorporated regional stylistic elements. But frankly, when you're cold and hungry, all you care about is getting that fire going. Think about it. Before gas stoves, before microwaves, before even decent ovens, cooking was an ordeal. You needed the right tools, and you needed them tough. So, you grabbed your cooking pot, likely made of cast iron, also courtesy of our friendly neighborhood blacksmith. These weren't exactly non-stick, mind you. Everything stuck, burned, and generally tasted faintly of smoke. But hey, it was food. And speaking of cooking pots, did you know there's evidence suggesting that some resourceful, or perhaps just lazy, medieval cooks actually buried their cooking pots underground to keep food cool in the summer? Talk about a rude cellar hack. Now, let's say you're planning a slightly more elaborate meal than gruel, maybe a hearty stew. You'll need to chop some vegetables. So you reach for your knife. Now, not every kitchen knife was made by a blacksmith. Cutlers specialized in bladed tools. But guess who often provided the raw iron, and who made the sturdier, butcher-style knives? Yep, the blacksmith. And while we're on the topic, let's dispel a common myth. Most medieval peasants weren't running around with razor-sharp, perfectly balanced swords tucked into their belts. Those were expensive, and mostly the domain of the wealthy. The average person's knife was more of a multi-tool, cutting food, whittling wood, maybe defending yourself from a particularly aggressive chicken. You know, the essentials. Alright, stew's simmering, fire's crackling. Time to, what? Fix that wobbly table leg. You head to your little storage nook, because let's be honest, most houses weren't exactly sprawling mansions, and grab a few nails. Ah, the humble nail. One of the most ubiquitous products of the blacksmith's shop. These weren't the mass-produced, perfectly uniform nails you find at the hardware store today. Each one was individually hammered and shaped. And you might think that's a boring detail, but think about the sheer volume of nails needed to build a house, a barn, a wagon. Blacksmiths were pumping these things out like crazy. It's even been suggested, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, that the success of some medieval construction projects hinged less on architectural genius and more on the blacksmith's ability to keep the nail supply flowing. I mean, who's gonna finish a cathedral without nails? Speaking of structures, let's not forget the importance of hinges and latches. Doors were essential for keeping out the elements, unwanted guests, human or animal, and maybe even the occasional mischievous sprite if you were particularly superstitious. And those doors needed to stay shut. Blacksmiths forged hinges of all shapes and sizes, from simple straps to ornate, decorative pieces for the wealthier clientele. They also made latches, bolts, and other locking mechanisms. Security wasn't exactly Fort Knox level, but it was better than nothing. Now let's wander outside the house for a bit. You need to fetch water from the well. You'll need a bucket, and that bucket needs a handle. And that handle? Probably made of iron, forged by a blacksmith. You might also need a chain to lower the bucket into the well. Blacksmiths were masters of chain making, painstakingly linking individual loops of iron together. It's a process that required skill, patience, and a tolerance for repetitive motion. I get bored just thinking about it. And while we're on the topic of water, let's think about animals. Your livestock needs to drink, and they need to be contained. Blacksmiths produced feeding troughs and livestock enclosures, which, let's be honest, weren't always the most effective. I picture a very persistent cow outsmarting my best attempts at fence building. You know, the simple joys of rural life. Let's imagine you're a farmer, and it's harvest time. You're going to need a scythe to cut the grain. Now, the blade itself was usually made by a specialist bladesmith, but the tang, the part that connects to the handle, the rings that hold the blade in place, and sometimes even the frame of the scythe were the work of the blacksmith. So, even in specialized tools, the blacksmith's hand was present. Now, before we get too lost in the agrarian lifestyle, let's remember that blacksmiths weren't just serving farmers. They also provided essential items for other trades. Carpenters needed axes and saws, miners needed picks and shovels, and even textile workers needed specialized hooks and tools for processing wool and flax. The blacksmith's versatility was what made them so indispensable. Blacksmiths made cauldrons of different sizes for different purposes. Big ones for doing the laundry and small ones for sauces. Oh, you want to make a pizza and are missing a pizza pan? Too bad, you can't have a pizza. So, you see, the blacksmith's world extended far beyond horseshoes and swords. It was a world of everyday objects, of essential tools, of the things that made life possible in a pre-industrial age. These weren't fancy, mass-produced items. They were hand-forged, durable, usually, and imbued with the skill and artistry of the smith. And while we might take these things for granted today, it's worth remembering the vital role that blacksmiths played in shaping the lives of our ancestors. Okay, settle in, friend. Let's dive deep into a world where fire dances, metal sings, and a hammer's clang isn't just a sound, but a spell being woven. You trudge through the swirling mists, the air thick with the scent of coal, smoke, and hot iron. It's a smell that clings to your clothes, your hair, even your dreams. You're approaching a smithy, not just any workshop, but a place where the mundane meets the magical. Go on, push that heavy wooden door open. Don't worry about the sparks. A little fire never hurt anyone, right? Unless, you know, it's a lot of fire. Inside, the heat hits you like a physical blow. The forge glows with an almost malevolent orange light, pulsating like a dragon's heart. You can feel the vibrations through the soles of your boots, the rhythmic thump of the hammer against the anvil. It's hypnotic, isn't it? Almost trance-inducing. A burly figure, face grimy and sweat plastering stray hairs to their forehead, stands silhouetted against the blaze. This is the smith, the master of this fiery domain. Now, blacksmithing wasn't just a job back in the day. It was an art, a craft, and a whole lot of mystique. Think about it. You're taking raw, unyielding metal and transforming it into something useful, something beautiful, maybe even something deadly. That's basically alchemy, but with less bubbling beakers and more, well, hammering. In many cultures, smiths were seen as possessing supernatural abilities, wielding powers that bordered on the divine. I mean, have you ever tried bending metal with your bare hands? Didn't think so. Imagine the power that gave them, especially when the majority of the population was illiterate. Suddenly you have someone creating the tools they depend on. That creates an elevated status over others. And it wasn't just brute strength. There was a certain knowledge, a secret understanding of the materials they worked with. The right heat, the right blow, the right quenching, all crucial. Mess one step up and you are not only failing to make the right tool for the job, but you are wasting the precious metal needed. Smiths guarded these secrets jealously, passing them down through generations of apprentices. It's like the ancient equivalent of keeping your Netflix password a closely guarded secret. One common belief held that the smith possessed the ability to control fire, an element that was both essential and terrifying. Fire gods feature prominently in many mythologies. Think Hephaestus, the Greek god of the forge, or Vulcan, his Roman counterpart. These deities weren't just blacksmiths, they were creators, shapers of the world itself. Now you understand why their human counterparts had such an elevated status in many regions. Historians still argue whether the link between smiths and magic was based on genuine belief or clever marketing. A good question if you consider the value of good marketing. Either way, the perception was powerful, shaping the way blacksmiths were viewed and treated within their communities. And that perception fueled a whole host of superstitions. For instance, some believed that the forge itself was a sacred space, a portal to the other world. You had to approach it with respect, observe certain rituals, or risk incurring the wrath of the forge spirits. Some smiths would leave offerings of food or drink for these spirits, hoping to ensure a successful day's work. It's like leaving out a plate of cookies for Santa, only smokier. Then there's the water used for quenching the hot metal. This wasn't just any water. It was often collected from specific sources, like a sacred well or a flowing stream, believed to possess purifying and strengthening properties. Dipping a freshly forged blade into this water wasn't just about cooling it down, it was a baptism, a ritual that imbued the metal with power. And if the water hissed and steamed just right, well, that was a good omen. But if it sputtered and spat, maybe you should just start all over again. Speaking of omens, the behavior of the fire itself was often interpreted as a sign of things to come. A bright, steady flame meant good fortune, while a flickering, smoky fire foretold disaster. Some smiths even claimed to be able to read the future in the patterns of the sparks that flew from the anvil. It's like a metallic version of reading tea leaves. And I wonder if the tea tastes as metallic. And it wasn't just the tools and materials that were imbued with magic. The smith themselves, through their skill and dedication, could imbue their creations with special properties. A sword forged by a master smith wasn't just a weapon, it was an extension of their will, a conduit for their power. These swords were said to be sharper, stronger, and imbued with the smith's own spirit. They were often given names, treated with reverence, and passed down through generations as prized heirlooms. It's probably why a certain blacksmith in Middle-earth wanted his ring back from a tiny little hobbit. The act of forging itself was often seen as a magical process, a transformation of raw materials into something greater than the sum of its parts. Think about it, you're taking a lump of formless metal and through heat, force, and skill, shaping it into something new. It's like the universe itself being molded by the hands of a creator. You could look at it as a spiritual process. Almost like a divine act if you are making the tools needed for survival. Now, here's a fun fact for you. In some cultures, blacksmiths were also considered healers, using their knowledge of metals and fire to cure ailments and ward off evil spirits. They might create amulets or talismans from specific metals, believed to possess protective properties. Or they might use hot iron to cauterize wounds, a practice that was both effective and, let's be honest, pretty metal. Pun intended, obviously. And the fringe tidbit? Well, there are stories of blacksmiths who were said to be able to forge weapons that could only be wielded by those who were pure of heart. Or swords that could cut through anything, even magic itself. Or, my personal favorite, hammers that could summon thunder and lightning. Talk about having a bad day at work for those on the receiving end. Superstitions and beliefs. Magic in the smithy. It all sounds so far-fetched, doesn't it? But consider the time. In a world where so much was unexplained, where the natural world was seen as both wondrous and terrifying, it's easy to see how the blacksmith, with their mastery over fire and metal, could be seen as something more than just a craftsman. They were conduits of power, wielders of ancient knowledge, and guardians of secrets that stretched back to the dawn of time. And the tools themselves could be their magic wands, the means of crafting not only things but destiny itself. You linger a moment longer, the heat still radiating from the forge. The smith nods to you, a silent acknowledgement of your presence. He's probably wondering when you will start to ask questions. Or if you are looking for the power to control fire as well. Then, it's time to step back out into the cool night air, the smell of smoke clinging to you like a lingering spell. Maybe, just maybe, you'll see the world a little differently now, knowing that even in the most mundane of tasks, there can be a spark of magic waiting to be ignited. Alright, gather round, settle in. Let's talk blacksmithing, but not the clang hammer part. Nope, we're diving deep into the delicious world of fueling a blacksmith. Imagine the sheer brute force needed to bend metal all day. You're not exactly sipping tea and nibbling on cucumber sandwiches while wrestling with a red-hot horseshoe. You need some serious sustenance. So you trudge into the smithy. It's dawn. The air smells of coal smoke, sweat, and the faintest hint of last night's ale. The fire is already starting to lick at the bellows, a hungry beast demanding to be fed. You're not the only one with an appetite, are you? That furnace is ravenous. The stomach growls. It's time for breakfast, and this ain't your modern-day avocado toast, millennial friends. We're talking stick to your ribs, keep you going till lunch, and probably dinner too, type of fare. You're probably reaching for a hunk of bread, maybe rye, maybe barley, whatever's cheap and filling. Remember, you're not exactly rolling in coin here. Smear it with some butter, or if you're feeling fancy, or the lord of the manor coughed up extra this week, a bit of cheese. Hard cheese, of course. Something that can survive being tucked away in a warm forge without turning into a science experiment. Think cheddar's rougher, older cousin. And meat? Absolutely. Probably salted pork, or bacon, something preserved to last. Fresh meat is a luxury, not a daily occurrence. Historians still argue whether the average medieval peasant actually ate that much meat, given the cost, but blacksmiths, they needed the protein. They were human engines, converting calories into the force needed to shape metal. Imagine trying to hammer out a sword after only eating a bowl of porridge. You'd be lucky to dent it, let alone forge a deadly weapon. It would be like trying to run a marathon on a single grape. Of course, you wash it all down with ale, or maybe some watered-down wine if you're feeling particularly sophisticated. Water, while technically available, wasn't always the safest option, you know? And hey, a little buzz might help with the monotony of the day. Just kidding. Mostly. Alright, breakfast down, time to get to work. The day stretches out before you, a long, hot, and arduous grind. You're constantly moving, feeding the fire, adjusting the workpiece, swinging that heavy hammer. You're sweating buckets, losing electrolytes, burning through those calories faster than you can say, heat stroke. What are you going to do? Snacking is key. This isn't about pleasure, it's about survival. You might keep a pouch of dried fruit, apples, berries, on hand. Maybe some nuts if you can get them. Again, something small and portable to give you that quick boost of energy. But the real MVP of blacksmith snacking? Jerky. Or something vaguely resembling jerky. Think tough, leathery strips of dried meat, seasoned with whatever herbs and spices were available. It probably tasted like boot leather marinated in dirt, but it was packed with protein and salt, exactly what you needed to keep going. You gnaw on it between strikes of the hammer, the smoky, salty flavor a welcome distraction from the searing heat and the endless clang. And, of course, more ale. Hydration is important, even if your hydration is slightly alcoholic. Plus, after a particularly frustrating bend or stubborn piece of metal, a swig of ale can be surprisingly motivational. It's like the blacksmith's version of a motivational poster, except instead of a picture of an eagle soaring majestically, it's a frothy mug of fermented barley. Quirky tidbit time, In some cultures, blacksmiths were considered to have magical properties, partially because they worked with fire and metal, but also because they possessed the strength to manipulate these elements. This led to some interesting dietary beliefs. Some thought that eating certain organs from animals, specifically the heart or liver, would imbue them with extra strength and stamina. Delicious? Maybe not. Lunch. A bit more substantial than a snack, but still needs to be practical. It's probably a repeat of breakfast, just on a slightly larger scale. More bread, more cheese, more salted pork. Maybe a bit of stew if you're lucky. Stew was the ultimate peasant food, a way to stretch whatever ingredients were available into a nourishing meal. It could contain anything: vegetables, scraps of meat, grains, beans. Think of it as the medieval kitchen sink. Imagine ladling a steaming bowl of this concoction, the savory aroma filling the forge, a welcome respite from the acrid smell of burning coal. You wolf it down quickly, knowing that every mouthful is fuel for the next few hours of grueling labor. As the afternoon wears on, the fatigue starts to set in. Your muscles ache, your back screams, and the hammer feels heavier than ever. You're tempted to give up, to throw down the hammer and collapse in a heap. But you can't. You have orders to fill, bills to pay, a family to feed. So you dig deep, find that reserve of strength, and keep going. More snacking, of course. Maybe you found some wild berries growing near the forge. A little sweetness can be a welcome pick-me-up. And, of course, more ale. You're starting to feel a little lightheaded, but you tell yourself it's just the heat. Finally, the sun begins to set. The day's work is done, or at least enough is done. You bank the fire, clean your tools, and trudge home, every bone in your body protesting. Dinner. After a day like that, you deserve a feast, right? Well, maybe not a feast, but at least something more substantial than lunch. If you're lucky, you might have some fresh vegetables from your garden. Cabbage, turnips, onions, the staples of the peasant diet. Maybe even a small piece of chicken or rabbit if you manage to catch one. More likely it's another bowl of stew, or maybe some porridge. But whatever it is, you eat it with gusto, savoring every mouthful. You're ravenous, your body screaming for replenishment. And, of course, more ale. You drink deeply, letting the alcohol numb the pain and ease the tension. As you sit there, nursing your drink, you reflect on the day. It was hard, exhausting, and often frustrating. But it was also honest work. You created something with your own hands, something that was both useful and beautiful. And that, in itself, is a reward. You know that tomorrow will be much of the same. The fire will need to be stoked, the metal will need to be shaped, and the hammer will need to be swung. But you'll be ready. You'll face the day fueled by a diet of bread, cheese, salted pork, and copious amounts of ale. It's not glamorous, it's not fancy, but it's what you need to survive. It's the blacksmith's diet, the secret to sustaining strength for labor. Historians still argue whether that much ale every day was necessarily the best choice. Oh, and remember when I said, no avocado toast. I lied. Apparently, avocados have been around for forever. Archaeologists found evidence of avocado consumption in Peru dating back to 8000 BCE. So, technically, your prehistoric blacksmith could have been enjoying avocado on rye. One last thing, ever wonder why so many blacksmiths were depicted as burly and, well, round? It wasn't just the ale. It was the calories. They needed to consume a massive amount of food just to keep up with the energy demands of their work. Imagine trying to burn that much fuel in a day. It was the original seafood diet. You see food, you eat it. Simple as that. You trudge wearily through the smithy. It's not just the heat radiating from the forge that makes your steps heavy, but the bone-deep exhaustion that clings to you like soot. The clang of hammer on steel has been your constant companion since sunup, shaping not just metal, but also your very being. Your muscles ache, your ears ring, and the taste of iron dust coats your tongue. Leisure? Rest? These words feel almost foreign, whispered promises from a distant, mythical land. But even in this demanding life, there were moments, fleeting, precious moments, of reprieve. Imagine the sun finally dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Not entirely unlike the inside of your forge, actually. The bellows fall silent, the hammer rests on the anvil, and the fire begins to subside. The work for the day is done. Mostly. You still have to clean up, of course. And maybe sharpen a tool or two in preparation for tomorrow. But technically, the heavy lifting is over. The first act of leisure? Probably collapsing. No joke, you're not sure how blacksmiths survived before modern ergonomics. You might simply slump against the nearest wall, letting the cool stone absorb some of the heat radiating from your body. Or perhaps you stumble towards a rickety stool, groaning as you lower yourself onto it. Either way, the relief is almost palpable. You can feel the tension slowly leaving your muscles, replaced by a pleasant, buzzing numbness. Once you've caught your breath, the next logical step is often a bit of personal grooming. Your hands, perpetually stained with grime and callous from constant labor, receive a cursory cleaning. Maybe a quick scrub with coarse sand and water, if you're feeling ambitious. Your face, similarly coated in sweat and soot, gets a similar treatment. It's not about vanity, though let's be real, everyone wants to look their best, even blacksmiths. It's about shedding the physical reminders of the day's toil, a symbolic act of leaving the forge behind. Of course, all this work has undoubtedly made you parched. Water is the obvious choice, though some blacksmiths, especially those who'd managed to wrangle a bit of coin, might indulge in a tankard of ale or mead. The taste is sweet and slightly bitter, a welcome contrast to the metallic tang that usually dominates your palate. It's a small luxury, but one that makes all the difference. It loosens the tongue, too. A few pints in and suddenly that difficult commission for the lord of the manor isn't looking so impossible after all. It might even sound like a fun job. Well, maybe not fun. Slightly less awful? Food, naturally, is another essential component of leisure. Blacksmiths needed to replenish the calories burned during long hours of physical labor. Think hearty stews, thick slices of bread, and whatever meat they could afford or hunt. Perhaps some vegetables from their own garden, if they had one. Meals were often simple and unpretentious, but they were deeply satisfying. Imagine wolfing down a bowl of steaming stew, the rich broth warming you from the inside out. It's a far cry from fine dining, but after a day at the forge, it tastes like ambrosia. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths actually ate as much as their apparent calorie expenditure would require. We'll probably never know for sure. With sustenance taken care of, you might seek out some social interaction. The smithy was often a hub of the community, so you were already surrounded by people. Maybe you join other blacksmiths for a game of dice or a round of tall tales. Sharing stories, gossiping about the day's events, and simply enjoying the company of others, this was a crucial part of unwinding. Laughter, even the rough and boisterous kind, helped to dispel the lingering stresses of the workday. And who knows, a blacksmith who can spin a good yarn is more likely to be remembered, right? It's like blacksmithing PR. Speaking of stories, storytelling was a common form of entertainment. Before the advent of Netflix, people relied on oral tradition to pass down history, myths, and legends. Blacksmiths, with their prominent role in society and their access to diverse clientele, were often privy to a wealth of fascinating tales. You might sit around the fire, listening to an old-timer recount a heroic saga, a cautionary fable, or simply a humorous anecdote. These stories offered a welcome escape from the realities of daily life, transporting you to a world of magic, adventure, and wonder. But there was a darker side to all this unwinding. Sometimes, leisure took the form of less savory pursuits. Gambling, drinking to excess, and engaging in petty squabbles were not uncommon, especially among blacksmiths living in poverty or facing constant hardship. The weight of their responsibilities, the stresses of their trade, and the lack of opportunities could lead to destructive behavior. Imagine losing your meager earnings in a dice game, or getting into a drunken brawl over a perceived slight. These moments of leisure could quickly spiral out of control, leaving you feeling even more depleted and demoralized than before. Remember when they said they were going to make a movie out of that? It's still in development hell. For some, religion offered a different form of solace. Blacksmiths, like most people in the pre-industrial world, were deeply religious. Attending church, praying, and participating in religious festivals provided a sense of community, purpose, and hope. You might find yourself kneeling in prayer, seeking guidance and strength to face the challenges ahead. Or perhaps you join in a festive procession, singing hymns and celebrating the glory of God. These religious practices offered a connection to something larger than yourself, a reminder that even in the midst of hardship, there was a divine presence watching over you. I bet a blacksmith could make an amazing crucifix. Just a thought. Now let's talk about sleep. After a long day at the forge, a comfortable bed would be a godsend. But reality was often far from luxurious. You might sleep on a straw-filled mattress, covered with a rough woolen blanket. Perhaps you'd share a small room with your family, or even sleep in the smithy itself. Comfort wasn't exactly a priority. But despite the less-than-ideal conditions, sleep was essential. It was the time when your body could repair itself, when your mind could rest, and when you could gather the strength to face another day. Think of it as blacksmithing's version of a software update. It's gotta happen eventually. Quirky tidbit time. Some blacksmiths believe that sleeping with a piece of iron under their pillow could ward off nightmares or evil spirits. The idea was that iron, with its protective qualities, would create a barrier against negative energies. It's a far cry from counting sheep, but hey, if it worked for them. Of course, not all blacksmiths had the luxury of complete rest. Many also farmed, or looked after livestock. If your wife was sick, or there were no other family members to rely on, taking time off simply wasn't an option. Even on days off, there would be chores. The water bucket doesn't fill itself, and firewood doesn't magically appear. Even with help, it could be a constant struggle to keep a roof over your head and food on the table. Scholars still argue whether blacksmiths had more leisure time than other professions. In one sense, sure, a blacksmith often worked for themselves, setting their own hours. On the other hand, their work was strenuous and dangerous. Maybe it all balances out to something similar in the end. So, as the day winds down and you finally close your eyes, remember that even in the demanding world of a blacksmith, moments of reprieve were possible. Whether it was a hearty meal, a shared story, a moment of prayer, or simply a few hours of sleep, these small pleasures help to sustain you through the hardships and challenges of your trade. And now, it's time for me to stop talking and let you drift off to sleep. I hope you dreamt of hammers, anvils, and the satisfying ring of perfectly forged steel. And maybe, just maybe, you dreamt of a day when leisure and rest are no longer rare commodities, but everyday realities. Alright, settle in, settle in. Let that tension melt away from your shoulders. Good. That's it. Now imagine, you're standing there, muscles aching ever so slightly, the metallic tang of iron thick in the air. Sparks dance before your eyes, little fleeting stars born from your hammer's kiss against the anvil. You're a blacksmith, a master of fire and metal, and for generations your craft has been essential. People need you. They need their tools, their horses shod, their gates mended. Life revolves around the rhythm of your hammer, a constant, reassuring beat in the community's heart. But in Hale, something's changing. You can feel it in the air, a subtle vibration beneath your feet, a low hum that doesn't come from the forge. It's the sound of something new, something bigger. It's the rumble of the Industrial Revolution, and it's headed straight for your livelihood. Now you might have heard the term, Industrial Revolution, tossed around. The textbook definition? A period of major industrialization that took place during the late 1700s and early 1800s. Yawn, yeah, we all know that one. But what does that actually mean for you, standing there, hammer in hand, sweating under the forge's heat? It means machines. Big, clanky, steam-powered machines that can do what you do, only faster and cheaper. Think about it. Suddenly, there's less demand for handcrafted goods. Why pay you for a custom-made plow when you can buy a factory-produced one for a fraction of the price? It's not as pretty, maybe not as personal, but it gets the job done, and in a world increasingly obsessed with efficiency, that's all that matters. The relentless march of progress. Sigh, it's hard to compete with. And it's not just plows, is it? It's everything. Nails, hinges, even horseshoes are being churned out in factories at an alarming rate. The blacksmith who specialized in ornate gate work? He's suddenly facing competition from mass-produced iron fences that look, well, kind of cheap, to be honest. But they're readily available and again cheaper. It's a race to the bottom, and you're starting to feel like you're running with lead weights strapped to your boots. The railways, in particular, are a game changer. Suddenly, goods can be transported across vast distances quickly and efficiently, undermining local economies and further eroding the demand for your services. Why bother with a local blacksmith when you can order tools from a factory hundreds of miles away? Sure, it takes a bit longer, but the price is just too tempting. And the steam engine? A marvel, sure, but a marvel that is quite literally fueling your decline. James Watt, the guy who improved the steam engine, inadvertently became the blacksmith's public enemy number one. Okay, maybe that's a bit dramatic. He probably didn't mean to put you out of business. But well, results speak louder than intentions, don't they? Then there's the rise of specialized industries. Before, you were a jack of all trades, able to turn your hand to anything from repairing farm equipment to crafting decorative ironwork. Now, factories are dedicated to producing specific items, employing specialized workers who perform repetitive tasks. This increased efficiency drives down prices even further, making it even harder for you to compete. You're not just competing with machines, but with entire systems designed to outproduce and undercut you. And don't even get me started on the Bessemer process. Suddenly, steel, stronger and more versatile than wrought iron, is readily available. And what does that mean for your traditional skills, honed over years of working with iron? Obsolescence, that's what. You're not just making less money, you're losing your relevance. This isn't to say that all blacksmiths disappeared overnight. Far from it. Some adapted. Some specialized. They focused on niche markets, crafting bespoke items for wealthy clients or repairing specialized equipment that factories couldn't handle. Some even became involved in the very industries that threatened their existence, becoming skilled machinists and engineers. They learned to swim with the rising tide of industrialization, rather than being swept away by it. There's a town in Scotland, for example, called Gretna Green. It became famous, or perhaps infamous, for runaway couples eloping to be married by the local blacksmith. Because, get this, Scottish law at the time allowed for irregular marriages, where a declaration of marriage in front of witnesses was enough to make it official. So, blacksmiths became de facto wedding officiants, hammering out not just metal, but marital unions. Talk about diversification. But even with adaptation, the decline was inevitable. The blacksmith shop, once the heart of the community, became a relic of a bygone era. The rhythmic clang of the hammer, once a constant soundtrack to rural life, faded into the background, replaced by the relentless hum of machines. And that's where the open scholarly debate comes in. Historians still argue whether the Industrial Revolution was a net positive for society. On one hand, it brought about unprecedented levels of economic growth and technological advancement. On the other hand, it created massive social inequalities, displaced countless workers, and led to the exploitation of labor. Was the price of progress too high? Pause, you think about that as you watch another factory spring up in the distance. Of course, there were some unexpected consequences. With the decline of horses and the rise of motorized vehicles, farriers, blacksmiths who specialized in shoeing horses, faced a similar plight. However, some resourceful farriers transitioned their skills to, wait for it, repairing automobiles. Turns out, hammering metal is hammering metal, whether it's a horseshoe or a dented fender. Who knew? You, however, see your children beginning to leave the forge. They're drawn to the cities, to the factories, to the promise of steady work and a regular paycheck. They don't want to spend their lives sweating over a hot forge, breathing in the fumes of coal and iron. They want something easier. Something modern. And can you blame them? You can't really. But it still stings, doesn't it? And then there's the realization that you're tired. Really tired. The repetitive motions, the constant heat, the weight of the hammer, it's taken its toll on your body. You can feel the aches in your joints, the stiffness in your back. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's time to hang up your hammer and let the machines take over. But even as you contemplate this, a flicker of defiance ignites within you. You're a blacksmith. It's in your blood. It's who you are. You've poured your heart and soul into this craft, and you're not ready to let it die. Not yet. So you grip the hammer a little tighter, adjust your stance, and raise the hammer high. You have no idea what the future holds, but you're determined to face it with the same strength and resilience that you've always brought to the forge. Softly, that's it. One more swing. Feel the power in your arm. The heat on your face. The satisfaction of shaping metal to your will. And remember, even as the world changes around you, the fundamental principles of craftsmanship endure. The importance of skill, dedication, and attention to detail. These are values that transcend time and technology. And who knows? Maybe, just maybe, there will always be a place for the blacksmith, even in a world dominated by machines. After all, what's a machine without someone to fix it when it breaks down? A slight chuckle. Besides, if the robots ever rise up, who else is going to forge the weapons to fight them? Think about that. You're not just a blacksmith, you're humanity's last line of defense. Now sleep well, you've earned it. Okay, settle in, make yourself comfy. Dim the lights, maybe light a candle with, like, a medievalish scent. I'm thinking burnt wood and a hint of iron. We're about to dive deep into the legacy of blacksmithing. So just relax, let your mind drift. You trudge through the mud, the chill seeping into your boots despite their thick leather. You imagine the medieval blacksmith, hardened by years of sweat and toil, doing the same thing, day in and day out. Except his boots are probably worse. You hear the rhythmic clang of hammer on steel echoing through the village, a sound as vital as the church bells, as comforting as your favorite ASMR tingle track. The forge glows like a small, contained sun, promising warmth against the biting wind. You can almost smell the coal smoke, that acrid scent that clung to everyone. You notice how the blacksmith's tools are surprisingly similar to some you might find today, just older, heavier. A hammer is still a hammer, right? A pair of tongs still grabs hot metal. Of course, today we have power hammers and welders, but the fundamental principles remain. It's kind of humbling, realizing the roots of modern manufacturing are right here, in this smoky, sooty space. Historians still argue whether the blacksmith was more artisan or laborer, a craftsman or a cog in the feudal machine. Some romanticize their skills, others highlight the grueling, often dangerous, conditions. But one thing is certain, they were absolutely essential. And by the way, did you know that some medieval blacksmiths were rumored to be alchemists in disguise? Yeah, trying to turn lead into gold on the side. I guess everyone needs a side hustle, even back then. The mainstream historical fact here, of course, is that blacksmiths produced everything from horseshoes and plowshares to swords and armor. They were the original all-purpose problem solvers, the medieval MacGyvers. Your cell phone playing ASMR right now? They would have crafted the tools to make the tools to eventually make that. The air crackles with heat as the blacksmith pulls a glowing piece of iron from the forge. Sparks dance around him like fireflies. You can feel the heat radiating outwards, warming your face. He places the metal on the anvil, and the clang of the hammer rings out again, shaping the molten material with practiced blows. Each strike is precise, deliberate. You admire the control, the skill honed through years of dedication. You think, man, all I can forge is a decent cheese sandwich. You watch as he crunches the hot metal in a trough of water. A hiss of steam rises, carrying with it the smell of hot iron and sulfur. Suddenly, you remember that one time you tried to make a knife in a blacksmithing class and nearly set your hair on fire. It was a humbling experience, to say the least. Now, the metal cools, hardening into its new form. The whole process is like a miniature industrial revolution unfolding before your eyes, only much, much slower. Speaking of slow, I once read that blacksmiths used to communicate with each other using secret hammer codes. Morse code for metal. Fringe tidbit alert. Imagine the conversations. I'm out of coal. Tap, 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 tap. Anyway, The blacksmith skill was highly valued. Royal armies depended on them, and good armor could turn the tide of battle. No blacksmith, no armor, no kingdom. Simple as that. Consider the intricate detail on some medieval weaponry. The delicate engravings, the complex patterns hammered into the metal. That level of artistry is astounding. It's a reminder that even in the midst of war and hardship, beauty could still be found, or rather, forged. Medieval blacksmiths were also known for their elaborate gate designs and architectural ironwork. The ironwork on the Notre Dame Cathedral is a testament to the skill and artistry of these medieval craftsmen. And it's still standing today. Now, about those debates. Historians still argue whether the decline of blacksmithing was primarily due to technological advancements or changing social structures. Did the rise of mass production simply make their skills obsolete, or did the shift from a feudal system to a more market-based economy change the demand for their services? It's a complex question with no easy answer. Probably a little bit of both. Either way, it's easy to see how blacksmithing has influenced our modern world. And here's a weird one. Some people believe that blacksmiths had a special connection to the elementals, spirits of earth, fire, water, and air. The process of blacksmithing involves all four elements, so maybe there's something to that. Maybe not. It is worth noting that blacksmiths also crafted tools for farmers. So if we didn't have these blacksmiths, maybe we would have a much tougher time finding lunch. Think about it. Without the advancements in metallurgy pioneered by blacksmiths, we wouldn't have the materials to build skyscrapers, bridges, or cars. Modern medicine relies on precision instruments, many of which are made from advanced alloys developed through the study of metalworking. So, next time you're driving your car or marveling at a tall building, remember the legacy of the medieval blacksmith. Now close your eyes. Imagine the rhythmic clang of the hammer fading into the distance. The heat of the forge slowly dissipates. The smell of coals smoke gradually fades. You feel a sense of quiet awe, a respect for the skill and dedication of these ancient craftsmen. Your muscles begin to soften, your mind is at ease. You're walking away from the forge now, the sounds of the village softening around you. The air is cooler, the sky a gentle twilight. You feel a sense of connection to the past, a sense of gratitude for the ingenuity and hard work that shaped our world. The world is a little softer now, edges fading. Your breath comes a little easier, the stress and tension melting away with each exhale. There is quiet here, peace, a sense of simple understanding. The images are becoming less sharp, softer, until you can almost reach out and touch the quiet and the dark and feel yourself drifting into sleep. Sleep now. Sweet dreams.